Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Aditya Birla Group Presents Working Across Generations Virtual Summit 2023. And we have with us now Devita Saraf, who is the founder, chairperson, and CEO of View Technologies and the View Group. And to me, she is one of the most remarkable women I have come across in recent times, who's a self-made person, who's also very grounded, and more important than all of that, who's very, very real. So while you can check her profile out down there and her many achievements and accolades, I want to introduce you to the Devita that I have seen and known over the years. She's somebody who's absolutely action-oriented, a very straight person. She works very hard. At the same time, she lives life like a real person. The best thing about having Devita here today is she will say it as it is. She doesn't beat around the bush. And even before we get started, I can promise you, we're going to get some absolutely golden nuggets on this particular interview.
Thanks
So
for the
let's dive
pressure,
straight.
Vinny.
Welcome to the summit, Devita, and thank you so much for
you.
making this time.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Fantastic. So, Devita, I'm going to jump straight in because you have actually done the work in terms of grown with this whole idea of generational, bridges and gaps that we have seen. You started very early at a young age of 24, and you've set up something that's no mean feat. And it's phenomenal. And you're still continuing to grow with it. There's no complacency. I want to know what has been your personal experience, because when you started, it wasn't commonplace for girls of 24 to just get up and think of starting something which is like a large scale manufacturing retail company and just go out there and make a name. So what has been your personal experience in this journey while working with people of different generations? Because I know your industry also would have people with lots of set principles and ways of working and mindset. And how did you navigate it? What are the adjustments you made and what are the things you strongly held on to?
Great. Vinny, when I started working at the family business when I was 22 years old, I actually spent a lot of time with my professor back at the University of Southern California of strategy, understanding how I can transition from, studying abroad into this family business in India. And one of the things that he said is that, people who've been in the workplace for a long time, they don't like the idea of this young whippersnapper coming in and telling them what to do. So he said that why don't you spend time with each person and say, hey, I'm Devita, I've joined in, I've studied here. Can you please teach me what is it that you do? And generally, people who are from an older generation have experience will then be very open-minded because they get a chance to explain what they do. They get a chance to feel respected and appreciated. And then they don't immediately see you as a threat who's coming to tell them what to do with their lives and careers and work. So I really took this advice very seriously, and I would go to literally every department head and say the same thing, that, please tell me what you do. Can you introduce me to your team? Give me an overview, etc. So that was a very useful thing, that whenever you deal with someone who has been in the industry for a while, instead of just going and telling them how things are going to be done, first try and understand what is it that their experience and learnings have been. The second thing also which makes a big difference is, when you're new, you're young, people are very curious as to what are you really doing there. Especially in case of women, it's always like, oh my God, is she just here to while away for a bit till she gets married? Is she going to do something? With guys, it's probably going to be the opposite and say, is he going to be more successful than his father, whoever? So there's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of cafeteria chatter. And you have to have the temptation, and this is what my professor said, you have to have the discipline to avoid the temptation to hear what people are talking about you. So sometimes people are very curious to, ask the grapevine, or what did someone say? And try and avoid that, just know you're there for the long run. So don't waste time trying to hear the grapevine on you. Mostly it's going to be inaccurate. It may not always be true. It may sort of discourage you sometimes. And also the source you heard it from, there'll be a lot of distrust as to why did you tell them we said this. So two things is, one, be humble and ask people what they do. Great opening line. Ask people for advice. They'll never say no. And just whatever chapter they are, if you are the new person, the new generation, just don't bother with what they have to say.
So amazing, fantastic. And I have one question for which I will dive a little deeper. How were you able to get assertive? I'm sure there were occasions when you perhaps had to exercise assertiveness because you had a double, triple whammy. One, like you said, it was, you also had a dad who was like into business. You're a woman and you were young. So I think there were just too many things that were perhaps a typical stereotype where you had to keep proving that you were not stepping on anyone's toes. So at that time, I'm sure there would have been occasions when you wanted to be assertive without offending. So how did you go about with that? If there's any anecdote that you could share.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So just because you're being, just because you want to blend in into a business and make your transition easy, that doesn't mean you're not strict about your work. One of the things that people expect is that women are going to bring the softer emotional side, and that's not true. You're there to do business. You're not there to like be the nice guy on the job. The second thing, which I found a lot of people used to come and tell me things to communicate to my father. And I said, listen, I'm not his spokesperson. You have something to say to him, go and tell him. Secondly, if you're going to say something about me to him, here's my dad, he will come and tell me. So, don't think that, you can sort of play politics in that way. The third thing, of course, is, sometimes you have to take a risk to not be liked. As Machiavelli has said in the famous book, The Prince, he said, it's important for a leader to be loved and to be feared, but must he have to choose between the two? He should choose to be feared. So what happened was I went to one of our dealers, and I saw that he was selling a competitor's product. And I immediately came back to the office and sent a notice that it canceled his dealership. And people who were heading the department, they were absolutely shocked. They said, you know what, he didn't know who you are. And I said, exactly, I was there to do mystery shopping and get actual feedback. And they wanted to create this big noise. And obviously, it wasn't a move that was very popular. But that's when I had to show that, sometimes few heads have to roll to prove that you have to be taken seriously as a boss, as responsible. And don't try and, be Mr. Nice Guy all the time or Miss Nice Girl all the time. Because people like bosses who are strong, who are strict, who, stand by their own decisions. So whenever it came to making an assertive decision, the important thing is to not change your decision if people don't like what you did. You kind of have to be like, listen, I did the right thing. Just because you think I'm this younger person, I'm not going to make a populist move and like go back on my beliefs.
I think that's amazing, and also that's bold and remarkable. Well done is all I can say, because I'm sure that kind of sets the stage, and for people to know what to expect and play it right. You said,
but I must give you I must give you one feedback though. Is trying to understand that this is the family business, right? So I had the opportunity to do all of these things because of the backing of the family. If you're in a professional setup, you may want to make sure that whoever is your boss or manager and someone in the ownership level or leadership level has your back and has given you that space to say, do what you want, make the changes you like.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Yes, we don't want people to go about taking stands and then putting themselves in trouble. So no, very fair point.
Exactly.
You said if there was a choice between, love and fear, fear is good. What, according to you, are the most common fears of each generation that you have observed?
I think what happened with the sort of Gen X baby boomer generation in India was they came from a time where India was not liberalized as an economy. So two things are, one, of course, stability of the job. People wanted to stay in one job for a longer time because if they lost their job, they would not be able to find one very soon. So that was one thing which, security was extremely important for them. And especially because very often there'd be like one earning member of the family. So giving them that sense of, security, that their jobs are safe, they are valued, they have a company has their back is important. Second thing for people who came from the pre-liberalized economy era was that there was a big gap between Indian and foreign brands and companies. So they used to always feel that the Indian brands are the sort of underdogs or the cheaper ones and not as good as the foreign ones. So sometimes they would lack confidence in being too out there,
Right.
which thankfully changed when the millennials and Gen Z came in, where there was a lot of confidence in India being this, fastest growing economy and democracy, and India being, such an important country on the map. So they don't feel that, oh, Indian companies are any less or Indians are less than anyone outside. I think for millennials, their biggest challenge is they're worried about stagnation. They don't want to be in a job where they feel they're stuck, they can't grow. I think millennials are very lifestyle oriented also. So they want a job that their friends more than their family, I would say, endorse. They want to be like doing the in thing, be part of the cool crowd associated with happening businesses, very out there entrepreneurs. And so for them, they care for a lot more fulfillment as opposed to security because they already have the security. Most of them are, I don't know, living in houses paid for by their parents and have like solid education and have multiple job opportunities. But they want to be able to, build their personality, build their social media, come across as different, come across as someone who is very, has their own identity. So it's a very, very different sense of what's important and what they're afraid of. I think millennials are probably afraid of not being relevant or being left behind.
And what about the newer generation, your new recruits? What do you see is their fear normally?
I think for a lot of the generation today who are Gen Z and then even younger Gen Alpha, one of the biggest challenges that I see with them, honestly, is a lot of fear for the future. Because what happens is they've grown up now in a world where environment is a big issue, equal rights is a big issue, equality is a big issue. I mean, they've seen so many issues with so much overdose of information. So they're kind of like concerned as to what is the world that we're going in. We've seen a pandemic, COVID. To see it when you're, in the workplace for a decade, it's easy. But when you're just starting out and you see a 2-year pandemic, it does shake you up a bit. So I would say that for them, of course, mental health is very important because it's a generation of excess, too much information, and social media is not helping there. But I think they also have this concern of a very long-term, larger perspective of where the world is going. And a lot of people are very critical of them. They kind of make fun of Gen Zs being so worried about animal rights and so worried about the environment and so worried about water and power and clean energy and clean beauty and all of that. But they need to understand that these guys are super worried that by the time they're 50, they'll have no water, or like most of like our forests would have dried up, or global warming would be at a peak. So I think for them a very larger perspective is kind of making sure that their future is not as dark as it probably will be.
Very interesting perspectives. So, Devita, you're a millennial, and that's why I'm going to focus a little bit more on that with you. What are the challenges typically? One, actually, no, let me backtrack. One, I want to know is that we all have spoken so much about millennials in the last decade or so, right? It's always that, okay, the millennial is a new game-changing generation, which gets a lot of negative publicity also.
Yeah.
I want to know that there is this narrative. Which ones do you agree with?
Okay.
And which ones do you think are just stereotypical?
Okay. I agree that millennials sometimes can be a little superficial and have a short attention span because they keep moving from thing to thing to thing, and people like from the previous generation think that they're not focused, and they get very swayed easily by what they see online, etc. So in a way, I agree with them. But the second part where they don't agree is just because millennials don't follow that typical formula. or that typical template of the previous generation, that this what you should study, and this is when you should marry, and this is where you should work. That they don't have this very like set in stone path. People think that they're not serious about their careers and their lives. People think that they are flitty, but that's not true. They actually are not flitting from things. They're actually figuring things out. They're actually finding what's relevant for them. Just this morning, I went for a walk with a friend of mine who's 25 years old, so she's Gen Z, and she was asking me questions. And she works in the crypto practice of Goldman in San Francisco, and she's looking at all these options with her life and career, what to do. And people see it as a negative way that, hey, why are you worrying so much? And I said, no, in a world today that's rapidly changing, it's important to have the direction of your own life and think through these things, whether what worked for your parents is going to work for you, and what worked for you now if it's going to work in the future. So I think millennials get a bad rap, that people don't see them as stable. But what they don't understand is the world today is not stable. So if you're being stable, you're probably going to get stuck. You kind of have to just keep adjusting and molding like some kind of amoeba in today's day and age.
I like how you said that we are figuring things out, because perhaps that's the awareness this generation is working with compared to Gen Xers, where I think it took me a lot of perhaps getting into entrepreneurship and then starting to work with the millennials to know that, yes, you got to figure things out. They're not handed, they're not told to you. And so I think that's a really interesting perspective, that it's not that they are not serious. They're just trying to work out which direction they want to go to, and they're being open about adjustments along the way.
Yeah.
So what tires you about, what tires a millennial about Gen X or baby boomers? Or where would they want them to understand them better, let's say?
I think one of the biggest challenges is morality. I think the previous generations had these very like they would look at religion, or they would look at traditions associated with a lot of morality. They don't see that today, if you have made changes, it's because you're staying relevant to a global world. So, there's a lot of norms that all millennials have heard from all their extended family of like, nahi, ye to niyam hai. Or at work, oh, these are the industry norms. And then if they are not following them, they're considered disobedient or immoral. Whereas the biggest challenge that millennials say that, listen, your thinking is very outdated. It was relevant when these mythology books were written, or it was relevant even up to like, independent India. But it may not be relevant when India is so much on the global scale. So I think millennials get frustrated when they are judged morally by people who feel that being traditional and being conservative means you're a better person. That's not true. Just following religion blindly makes you a better person. That's not true. Following gender norms makes you a good woman or a good man. That's not true. Like blindly following your boss or seniors without questioning them is respect. That's not true. So I think the previous generation sometimes just really waved the flag of, norms in a way of doing things right. But just because something is a norm doesn't mean that it is done right.
Interesting, very interesting, and I guess very relevant. Yes, sometimes I think the narrative often is, we could do it, why can't you? And we know what's right. Absolutely. What about Gen Z? What kind of, let's say, I wouldn't say frustrates, but annoys you about Gen Z? Or what is the thing that you'd want a Gen Z person, individual, even a professional to consider?
Gen Z is going to live in a very different world than even millennials, because millennials kind of had like one foot in like a pre-digital analog era, and then 1 foot of like when the internet and Google and social media came out. So they kind of could figure and see what worked for them, what didn't. Gen Z, as they say, they're not going to be educated by their parents, they're educated by Google. So, their mindset is completely like post-internet era, right? For them, internet is like air. It's something that was always there. And that has really transformed the way they think. The biggest thing that happens though with Gen Z, which I find very dangerous, is just how crazy they are about optics,
Yeah.
and when, what perception is reality for them, their social media, their outlook, what will people say, especially I worry sometimes for a lot of women of everything that they're trying to do uh, to sort of get that kind of popularity that they want digitally. I think sometimes they need to keep it real
Yeah.
and be like, listen, if Instagram just went bankrupt one day, you should still have a life. So I think for them, a lot of their virtual world and the real world is a blend. But sometimes they need to get a little bit back to a non-digital world where they're connecting with people on a human level. They are, have spending more time on face to face than just being lost in the digital world, and spending a lot more time figuring out what they want to do as opposed to being driven by what their friends on social media are doing.
Or being driven by the algorithm, which tells them what
And
they
then their friends are driven by the algorithm. So yeah, I guess that,
Today
you
it's that
know,
the algorithm says what your belief system should be, what your
exactly.
should be. And yeah, that's the scary part. Absolutely. Uh, you're managing a large force and you have actually grown at a very fast pace, if one may see, in terms of like you're very young still and you're running this large company, 1,000 crores, you've not looked back. You also believe in, I think some bits of your old school in terms of investment. I do remember seeing one clip of yours where you said, well, if I had excess money, I would invest it back in my own company. You know,
Yes,
to
yes.
and
I know
that's
what's the ROI I can give to myself.
and I think with that, but I comes a lot of management. You
Yeah.
could not have created this had you not probably figured that amazing key, that master key of working with multiple people and driving them to, to productivity, to great outcomes. So what one has been your biggest challenge in managing a multi-generational workforce, and what are the biggest opportunities that you have discovered of that setup?
I think, of course, the previous generation very often comes with like, this is the way things are done, or these are the norms. So that becomes, and the young generation are not always very open to, like they see that over the previous generation is just not relevant. But there's a kind of like a midway that they have to reach, because the previous generation brings in experience and the newer generation brings in enthusiasm. So when they learn to work with each other, respect each other, and know that everyone is important because everyone is bringing in a skill set that makes the team stronger, then they work with mutual respect, for each other's skill set and experience and knowledge and outlook, as opposed to just some kind of fake respect because of gender, seniority, education, background, I don't know, achievements. I think it's very important. It's very wrong in India sometimes. They don't understand that respect is a two-way street. So this mindset of like, respect elders, or for women have to respect men. Yo, hello, if you don't respect me back, respect is like love. You're not gonna love someone who doesn't love you back. So don't expect someone to respect you if they don't respect you back. So I think building respect from both sides for each other, for what they do, for what they know, for what drives them. I think that's been a very, very, very important thing for me to build a company culture. The second thing also I would say is equality. Like just one of the biggest things that happens in a lot of Indian companies is major hierarchy. It's always like one patriarch or some senior guy sitting out there who's been there for the longest time. And there's people who report to him, and there's like this one big pyramid. And I don't think that pyramid is relevant anymore. It's a very fluid ecosystem. So for us at View, we value people for their intelligence, their loyalty, their drive, their hard work, as opposed to like, slotting people based on age and gender and background, etc. So I think that respect is very important, and saying that, look, everyone's equal. Everyone as a human being will be treated well. Everyone as a human being will get opportunities. And I always say that, no, sabko praise milega or sabko danda milega. There's nobody that, because of gender or salary level or something, is going to be at like the bottom of the pyramid. Everyone gets treated very equally as a culture. And with respect, that equal culture gets elevated. So you don't have this system in India. Hierarchy causes a lot of issues, and hierarchy has a lot of constructs, demographical constructs that create these sort of patriarchal power structures. So the biggest thing for me has just been building a very flat culture and saying, you know what, respect young people and we'll respect you back, and men have to respect women and vice versa, and the seniors have to respect the juniors, and the expensive employees have to respect the more entry level employees, and that's how we'll all work like one nice ecosystem.
Fantastic. So earlier on, you told me about how you started and you went and humbly tried to understand from people in different departments what their roles were, what they were doing, which was you making an effort towards a senior generation. How does a senior generation get accepted by the younger generation? What do you think they can do that can make the younger generation a little bit more accepting of, yes, there are certain things which are set in stone for them, but they also do come with some level of groundedness or tradition or experience? And how can they feel, or what are the gestures that they can do that the younger generations can feel that, okay, yes, I think we are equal and we do respect each other for what we bring to the table?
So when I started the company, I used to have these all staff meetings, where we used to get everyone in the boardroom and order pizza, and each person had to present about 20 minutes as to what they're doing and their plan forward and some thoughts, etc. And the younger generation, of course, will be super like colorful, like decks with like videos and transitions. And the previous generation would maybe on a Word doc have like 3-4 points written. But we gave everyone a chance to express themselves in that equal footing. I don't have so many of those meetings anymore because there are 300 employees. I can't fit them in a boardroom. But I think when people get a chance to express themselves, I think that's when both generations then can see, okay, I get what you're thinking. Then the format of expression does not matter anymore. So I think if you want your previous generation to be accepted by the younger generation, meetings like these where you get multiple generations, let them present. Even when you're doing like company events like Diwali parties and all, like get everyone together. Sometimes what happens is these youngsters party going on. Like get everyone together. Let's get everyone to feel like they're part of one team. Because even for a lot of the older generation want to feel young again. So, just they may, I don't know, they may sing old Hindi songs or something in like some talent contest, but cheer them on, like make them also feel like they are bringing out their youthfulness and expression, and value the youth in an older person rather than just by going by their chronological age.
Fantastic. I think very sharp, very specific. I think that's brilliant. So what do millennials and Gen Z need to learn about leadership in this multi-generational workplace environment? What are the tips you'd like to give them? What would they need to upskill themselves on or build up?
I think one of the things that has happened is, as JFK, John F. Kennedy said, ask not what you can, ask what you can do for your country, not what your country can do for you. It's the same thing for women and men today who are between the ages of 15 and 35, that when you join business, ask not what the company can do for you, ask what you can do for the company. So sometimes a lot of younger employees have this constant mindset कि employee के लिए क्या, employee के लिए what are employees getting? What are you doing for the boss? You know, what is it that you're doing for the company? So that's one thing they need to understand is, you know, this is your company, your bosses are not your parents. They're not out there to like, they're not responsible for you. You're there to work and then they will compensate you for the work you do and everything else around it. So stop making this whole big hoo-ha drama of like very often that I see of, you know, a one-sided street again of employees always asking to be taken care of, but not looking at what the company needs, what the bosses need. You know, again, it's a two-way street. They take care of you if you take care of them. Stop being selfish and entitled and just saying, "Oh my God, what are they doing for us?" I think people who have grown in their careers at a corporate level, at a professional level, at an entrepreneurial level, have always kept the company's benefit in mind. And that's when the company has seen them as a valuable person and involved them in their growth plans.
So I think that's a brilliant insight. So essentially, it would trickle down even from company to then your actual customer mindset. So if you have a customer mindset, you'll be inclined to serve and add value. And I think that would go internally and then externally to be able to understand that when you serve, when you contribute, when you add value is when you start getting value in turn.
Yeah, it's like you're on a cricket team, right? You make runs, people will value you. If you're just going to sit there and be like, oh, what am I getting out of it? You know,
Yeah.
people are like, why are you here? So I find for a lot of the Gen Z, and there's so much chatter all over LinkedIn always of employee benefit, employee this, employee that. What about like bosses and entrepreneurs? They're taking on risks. They're taking on like, you know, major challenges that they go through to make sure that you are paid and the company is stable and growing. So, you know, if they're taking care of you, take care of your bosses too.
Fair point. You did say that, you know, there is this culture of respect and acceptance that you believe is important. And then that's how one can be work collaboratively. How do you ensure the communication and coordination? And I'm curious, this is specific to you or your company. What about, you know, even general things in communication like IDK, smiley faces, you know, all these short forms. So do you have a standard way to kind of standardize how each, you know, does everyone speak the same language, or do we speak these acronyms and which side has to adjust, or is there a standard language that you believe is what is the best way to go forward?
First of all, depends on the business. So mine is a luxury tech brand. So the language, the tonality of the business is very direct and very formal. So what happens is people, even within the department, will send an email, dear Miss Ajmera, you know, ensuring that our Zoom call for today is confirmed for so and so time. And, you know, should you have questions, let us know. And that's because the company and the product is in that line. If you're a software business and you're making some fun app, then maybe you can use all these acronyms and terms. So I would say communication is more reflective of the industry and the positioning and the brand image of the company rather than the generation.
But would you still feel then within the way that it's meant to be, it should be standardized? So let's say if it is that fun app company.
It just tends to flow down, you know, like the communication that's in your advertising, the communication that's in your presentations, then the tone of voice sort of remains the same. That today within View, if you are my salesperson, or if you hear my customer support on the phone, or you hear my interview, or you're in a meeting, like the tonality remains the same. If I was someone who was like, you know, all casual and speaking in that language, throwing in a lot of Hindi words, you know, throwing in acronyms in my interviews, and that's how I taught my team to speak in meetings and dress casually. It would then just, you know, communication, any kind of visual, verbal communication, just sort of flows from top to bottom. So tomorrow, if I start turning up in like jeans and being like, you know, IDK, then maybe people will be like, you know, hand OP. But if I maintain the language of quite being proper, I think my team follows through.
So very quickly, before we wrap up, in very short, like a rapid fire answer, what will be your one key advice to Gen X so they excel in a multi-generational workplace?
Be humble.
Okay. And advice for Gen Y,
Who's Gen Y?
uh, millennials.
Ah, you'll figure it out.
Okay. And Gen X.
Don't give up yet. You still have a lot of value to give.
Fantastic. I think this was beautiful. Devita, thank you so much for doing this, being a part of it. And I'm sure this is going to be very useful to all our viewers. And for those of you who are watching, I hope you've had many, many takeaways, as have I. And we will thank our sponsors, Aditya Birla Group and Devita, for making this happen today. And we will see you again soon. Thank you, Devita.
Thanks, Vinny. Bye.